On the edge of the galaxy, the great space station Helios Prime floated like a shining city among the stars. It was vast, with towers of silver and glass, lights glowing like a million suns, and ships docking every hour from distant worlds. For traders and workers across the galaxy, Helios Prime was more than a station, it was a symbol of power. And at the very top of this power sat one man, Ronan Vale. Ronan Vale was not just a billionaire. He was the kind of man whose name carried both admiration and fear. Every corridor, every worker, every machine on the station was under his command. He had built his empire from nothing, or so the stories said, and now his word was law. Managers repeated his orders without question. Guards obeyed him with silence. And the workers, ordinary people who cleaned, carried, repaired, and served, kept their heads low whenever he passed. No one dared to talk back to him. Not once in all the years of his rule. In the grand hall of Helios Prime, there was a statue of him taller than life, with sharp features carved in shining stone. Workers often passed by it, eyes down, whispering only when no guard was near. "That's the man who controls our lives," one would say softly. "Don't ever cross him," another would reply. The warnings were always the same. But on a quiet morning, when ships had just arrived from 3 different systems and the station bustled with noise, a new worker stepped through the gates. She was not a trader or a manager. She was not a guard, nor a technician. She was a cleaning lady. Her name was Myra. Myra was small and quiet, with dark brown hair tied neatly at the back and simple gray clothes given to her by the station. Her skin was warm and sun-kissed, showing she had come from a world where the sun still touched the earth. She carried no grand possessions, only a worn bag with her tools and a folded piece of paper with her work assignment. She walked slowly, taking in the sight of Helios Prime. Everything was larger than she imagined: shining walls, massive windows where stars stretched like rivers of light, and corridors that seemed to never end. Around her, workers hurried past, too busy or too tired to notice her. At the checkpoint, a guard scanned her assignment paper and nodded. "Cleaning sector," he said without looking at her face. "Report to level 14. Myra nodded softly. She didn't complain. She didn't ask questions. She simply followed the path shown to her, carrying her bag close to her chest. Level 14 was not a place people visited with pride. It was one of the maintenance levels, filled with narrow halls, humming machines, and the smell of metal and oil. Workers here rarely saw the grand windows or the shining towers above. Their job was to keep the station alive while others enjoyed its beauty. Myra began her duty there, sweeping floors, cleaning panels, and wiping the walls until they shone. She noticed something quickly: no one talked freely. Workers did their jobs in silence. If they spoke, it was only in whispers. Fear lingered in the air, not because of the work itself, but because of the man who owned it all. That evening, Myra passed by a group of workers eating quietly in the small cafeteria. She heard one of them mention Ronan's name. At once, the others looked around nervously, their voices dropping lower. "Don't speak too loud," one warned. "You never know who is listening." Myra listened but said nothing. She simply observed. To her, it was strange. On her home world, people spoke freely even when leaders were near. But here, silence was safer than truth. Far above level 14, in his glass office overlooking the stars, Ronan Vale watched reports scroll across glowing screens. Numbers, profits, trade routes, all under his command. He leaned back in his tall chair, satisfied. "No one challenges me," he said softly to himself, the corners of his lips lifting in a proud smile. "This station runs because of me." And he was right. At least, for now. In the days that followed, Myra continued her work quietly. She swept the halls, polished the walls, and made herself nearly invisible among the busy workers. Most ignored her, as cleaning staff were often overlooked. But she saw everything. She saw how managers stiffened whenever Ronan passed. She saw how workers rushed to fix even the smallest mistake before a guard noticed. She saw the fear that ruled every corner of Helios Prime. One evening, as she finished her shift, Myra paused at a large window near the docking bay. She looked out at the stars, endless and beautiful, stretching farther than the eye could see. Somewhere deep inside her, she felt a strange certainty. This place might be ruled by Ronan Vale. This station might carry his name and his pride. But power built on silence and fear never lasted forever. She placed her hand against the glass, watching a ship fly past the station lights. She did not know how or when, but something inside told her that her presence here was not by accident. For now, she was just a cleaning lady. Quiet, unnoticed, ordinary. But the stars seemed to whisper a different story waiting ahead. Morning on Helios Prime began with the sound of announcements echoing through the station's corridors. The voices were calm, mechanical, and firm. Work shifts begin in 1 hour. Docking Bay 3 is receiving cargo. Report to your assigned stations. Workers hurried along the polished floors, boots clicking, eyes forward. The station looked alive, but underneath the movement there was stillness, the kind that came from fear. On the upper levels, the grand hall gleamed like a palace of light. Transparent windows showed the endless stars outside, while banners of silver and gold hung from the tall walls, each marked with the symbol of Vale Industries. At the center of this hall stood a wide stage. And on that stage, in front of thousands of workers, stood Ronan Vale. His presence was as sharp as the cut of his dark suit. His hair was sleek, his shoulders broad, and his voice carried power. Every worker's eyes were on him, though not a single one looked at him directly for too long. To hold his gaze felt dangerous. People of Helios Prime, Ronan began, his voice echoing across the chamber. Once again, our profits surpass the competition. Once again, we hold control of trade routes across 4 systems. And once again, it is my leadership that ensures your jobs, your meals, and your safety. The workers listened in silence. No applause, no cheers, just silence. Ronan's lips curved into a satisfied smile. He was used to this silence. To him, it was not emptiness. It was respect. You are here because of me, he continued proudly. Do not forget it. Everything you see, every ship that docks here, every credit earned, it all exists because I made it possible. Remember that before you ever question the order of things. The speech ended with a wave of his hand, as if brushing away any thought of doubt. Guards in black armor stepped forward, signaling that the workers should return to their stations. One by one, people left the grand hall, heads low, mouths shut. Among them was Myra, the cleaning lady. She had been ordered to polish the floors along the side of the hall while the speech took place. She knelt quietly with her tools, cloth in hand, while Ronan's words filled the air. She didn't react, didn't lift her head, but every word carved itself into her mind. As the crowd thinned, she noticed something others might not. When Ronan's back turned, a few workers exchanged looks. Not loud, not bold, but quick glances of frustration. Myra caught the tiny frown of one technician, the way a guard tightened his jaw, the way a manager's eyes narrowed before he forced a fake smile. It was not loyalty that filled the hall. It was fear. And under that fear, resentment grew like a shadow. Later, back in the maintenance corridors, Myra overheard whispers. 2 workers carried heavy tools past her, speaking in hushed voices. He says he gives us everything, one muttered. But he takes more than we can ever repay. Quiet, the other warned sharply. His eyes darted around. When he spotted Myra, he fell silent at once. Workers passed her without another word, too afraid even to speak in her presence, though she was no guard. Myra bent to sweep the floor, but inside her thoughts stirred. On her home world, leaders who spoke of themselves instead of their people often fell. They built walls of pride, but walls could crumble. That evening, she finished her duties and walked along a corridor that led past one of the massive engines. The sound of it hummed deep and steady, filling the walls with vibration. She paused, resting her hand on the metal. The rhythm reminded her of an old song her grandmother once sang back home, a song meant to calm storms. Without thinking, Myra hummed softly to herself. The hum seemed to carry through the engine, echoing faintly as though the machine answered her. The lights flickered once, not harshly but almost like a breath. Myra stopped, startled. She looked around, but no one else seemed to notice. A few technicians worked nearby, too busy with their tasks. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling. Her song had touched something deeper in the station. The next day, Myra continued to notice little details others ignored. A worker nearly dropped a heavy crate, but caught himself when he saw a guard watching. A manager scolded a young assistant, not because of the mistake, but because Ronan had passed nearby. Fear shaped every action, like invisible chains. And above them all, Ronan remained untouchable. In his high office with walls of glass, he watched reports stream across his desk. He measured people like numbers, victories like trophies. To him, the station was not a community, it was his empire. That night, in the small cafeteria of level 14, Myra sat alone at a corner table, eating a simple meal. Around her, groups of workers ate in silence. A few exchanged soft words, but every sentence was cut short by glances at the door. For the first time, one worker dared to speak louder than usual. If only someone could stand against him, he whispered, his voice just strong enough for those near him to hear. The table went silent. All eyes flicked nervously to the corners of the room, where cameras watched. "Do not say such things," another worker hissed. "He hears everything." Myra lowered her gaze to her meal, but her heart beat faster. She did not speak, yet the words stayed with her. If only someone could stand against him. The station was a fortress built on fear. Every worker knew it, every guard felt it, and even the stars outside seemed to shine colder because of it. But in the quiet corners of Helios Prime, in the silence of engines and the whispers of workers, something else began to stir. Myra felt it within her. A strange, steady courage, like a flame too small to notice but too strong to die. She didn't yet know why she felt it, or what it meant. She only knew one thing: silence was not the natural state of human beings. And sooner or later, silence would be broken. The nights on Helios Prime were never truly dark. The station's lights glowed at all hours, shining across endless corridors and maintenance halls. But when most workers rested in their bunks, the station grew quieter, and the sound of the engines became like a heartbeat in the walls. It was during these hours that Myra often worked, cleaning the less traveled sections of the station. One evening, she found herself alone in an empty corridor that led to the power core chamber. Few workers ever went that far unless ordered. The air was warmer there, filled with a steady hum that made the metal floor vibrate beneath her feet. As Myra wiped the long panels along the wall, she began to hum softly, almost without noticing. It was an old tune, a lullaby from her childhood. Her grandmother used to sing it during storms back on her home world, a song that was said to calm restless winds. The melody was gentle and simple, rising and falling like waves. At first, it was only her voice filling the quiet corridor. But then something strange happened. The lights overhead flickered once, in rhythm with her song. The hum of the engines deepened, almost as if they had joined in. Myra stopped, startled, and the sound of the station returned to normal. She stood still, her cloth in hand, wondering if it was just her imagination. Curious, she tried again. This time, her voice was clearer, a little louder. The melody stretched through the corridor, carrying warmth and calm. Slowly, the panels on the wall glowed brighter, soft pulses of light moving in harmony with her tune. Myra froze, her heart pounding. She had never seen anything like it before. Her song was not just sound, it was reaching into the very systems of Helios Prime. A faint noise behind her made her turn quickly. 2 technicians had entered the corridor, carrying a tool case. They stopped in their tracks, their eyes wide as they saw the glowing panels. What is that?" one whispered. Myra fell silent at once. The lights dimmed back to their usual state, and the hum of the engines returned to normal. She lowered her gaze, pretending to focus on her work. "It's nothing," she said quietly. "Just a sound." But the technicians exchanged looks of disbelief. "No machine reacts like that," the other murmured. "The station," it responded. Myra gathered her tools quickly and walked away before they could ask more questions. Her steps were calm, but inside her mind raced. How could my song do this? The following day, whispers had already begun to spread. Not loud, not public, but soft voices carried from one worker to another. They spoke of the cleaning lady whose voice touched machines. Some laughed, saying it was nonsense. Others grew curious. But no one spoke too loudly, for fear of the guards. Myra noticed the stares. When she passed workers in the corridor, some looked at her with quiet wonder, while others lowered their heads, pretending not to notice. The silence around her was heavier than before. She tried to ignore it and continued her duties. Yet when she worked alone, she could not resist testing her voice again. In the storage bay, she sang a single line, and the overhead lights dimmed softly, like a bow lowering in respect. In the water recycling chamber, her tune caused the flow to shift into perfect rhythm. It was not her imagination. The station was alive in some way, and it listened to her. That evening, in the cafeteria of level 14, she sat at the same corner table. Workers whispered at nearby tables, their eyes flicking toward her now and then. Finally, one brave technician leaned closer and spoke quietly. "We saw what you did," he said. His voice was trembling, but his eyes were filled with awe. "Your song, it changed the machines." Myra hesitated. She had not planned to tell anyone. "It was just an old melody," she replied softly. "Maybe it was chance." The technician shook his head. "No. It was more. I've worked with these systems for 10 years. They don't respond to chance. They responded to you." His words made her heart heavy. She didn't want attention. She had come to the station for quiet work, not for eyes staring at her as if she were something more. Yet deep inside, she felt the truth of what he said. That night, as she lay on her bunk in the workers' quarters, Myra stared at the ceiling. The station hummed gently around her. "Why me?" she thought. "Why would my song hold such power?" Far above, in his glass office, Ronan Vale read reports as usual. His empire was secure, his workers silent, his power untouched. But even there, a small message reached his desk, rumors spreading among workers. A cleaning lady with a strange ability. Machines reacting to sound. Ronan frowned at the words, tapping his finger against the desk. He had no patience for nonsense, yet he knew how quickly rumors could turn into unrest. His empire was built on silence, and silence left no room for wonder. "Find her," he ordered his assistant coldly. "Bring her to me." On level 14, Myra slept unaware of the order that had been given. The stars outside the station burned silently, as if waiting for the moment when one quiet voice would soon challenge the untouchable ruler of Helios Prime. The next day began like any other on Helios Prime. Workers moved in silence through the bright corridors, carrying tools, crates, and reports. The station's announcements echoed above their heads, reminding them of shift hours and docking schedules. To the ordinary eye, everything seemed as orderly as always. But underneath, Whispers moved faster than the cargo ships that docked at the base. The whispers were about Myra. By now, almost every worker had heard something, though no two stories were the same. Some said she could command machines with her voice. Others claimed she sang and the engines answered her. A few even believed she could control the stars themselves. Most brushed it off as foolish talk, but none could deny the rumor was spreading. And on a station ruled by silence, even a whisper carried great weight. Ronan Vale soon heard it as well. In his tall glass office overlooking the stars, Ronan read reports on a glowing screen. His jaw tightened as he saw the words repeated again and again: cleaning lady, song, machines reacting. To him, it was nonsense. But the idea that workers spoke of anyone other than him filled him with irritation. He leaned back in his chair, his dark eyes narrowing. They should speak only of me, he muttered. Not of a worker. Not of a nobody. When his assistant asked if the rumors should be ignored, Ronan shook his head sharply. Ignored? No. If left unchecked, even the smallest flame can spread into a fire. I will put an end to this myself. And so, he arranged a gathering. That evening, the great hall was filled once again. Thousands of workers stood in neat rows, guards lined the walls, and the banners of Vale Industries hung high above. At the center of the stage stood Ronan, tall and commanding, his voice steady as he addressed the crowd. I hear talk, he began, his tone cold and firm. Talk of strange powers. Talk of songs and machines. Foolishness. His gaze swept across the hall. This station does not run on songs. It runs on order, discipline, and my leadership. Without me, this place would fall into chaos. The workers kept their heads low. No one dared to speak. And yet, Ronan continued, these whispers spread. They speak of a worker who sings. So let us see this worker. Let us see this so-called power. The crowd shifted uneasily as guards stepped forward, guiding Myra to the stage. She walked slowly, her gray uniform plain against the bright lights of the hall. She held her bag close, her step small but steady. Thousands of eyes followed her, some filled with pity, some with curiosity, and some with fear for what might happen. Ronan looked down at her, his lips curling into a faint smile. So this is the woman who sings to machines, he said. His voice carried across the hall like a blade. Tell me, Myra, do you claim this power? Myra kept her eyes lowered. I make no claim, she answered softly. It is only a song. Her calm voice made some in the crowd exchange glances. Few had ever spoken so simply in front of Ronan. Ronan's smile faded. Only a song? Then show us. Prove to all these workers what your song can do. Or admit that you are nothing more than a cleaner with a foolish story. The hall fell silent. Not even the sound of breath seemed to move. Myra stood still, her hands folded in front of her. She did not ask for this moment, but now it was here. She could feel the eyes of every worker pressing down on her, waiting. Some expected her to fail. Some hoped she would succeed. And high above, Ronan waited to silence her forever. Slowly, Myra lifted her head. Her eyes were calm, her voice steady. If it is a song you want, she said softly, then I will sing. Gasps spread through the hall. No one had ever spoken back to Ronan so directly, not with anger, but with quiet courage. Ronan stepped aside, his arms folded across his chest. Very well. Show us your power. If you fail, let every worker here remember that I alone hold control of Helios Prime. Myra closed her eyes. For a moment, the hall was filled only with silence. Then, she opened her lips and began to sing. It was not a loud song. It was not harsh or commanding. It was gentle, flowing like water, carrying notes that seemed older than the station itself. The sound filled the hall, soft yet strong, like a river moving through stone. The lights above flickered once, then twice, pulsing in rhythm with her voice. The floor beneath their feet trembled slightly, not in danger but in harmony. The great windows at the back of the hall glowed brighter as distant stars seemed to shimmer in time with her melody. Workers gasped, eyes wide with awe. Some placed hands over their mouths. Others lifted their heads fully for the first time, no longer afraid to look. Ronan's face stiffened. He had expected failure, humiliation, silence. Instead, the station itself seemed to bow to her song. When her voice finally faded, the hall was utterly still. No one moved. No one spoke. It was as though every sound had been swallowed by her melody. And for the first time in his reign, Ronan Vale himself stood speechless. The great hall of Helios Prime had never been so quiet. Thousands of workers stood frozen in their places, eyes fixed on the cleaning lady who had just finished her song. Myra's voice still seemed to linger in the air, soft echoes humming in the walls and engines. For a long moment, no one dared to breathe. The panels along the ceiling glowed faintly, as though the station itself had listened. The stars beyond the wide glass windows shimmered brighter, their light spilling across the floor. Workers who had always bowed their heads now lifted them, staring in awe. And at the center of it all stood Ronan Vale, silent. The billionaire CEO, who had ruled with words sharp as iron, now had none. His lips parted slightly, but no sound came. For years, his speeches had filled this hall. For years, his voice had commanded obedience. But Myra's song had done what no one else ever dared, it had silenced him completely. Myra lowered her head once more, her hands folded calmly in front of her. She had not sung to boast or to challenge. She had only sung because he asked. And yet, the effect was far greater than she imagined. A murmur rose among the crowd. It was soft at first, then spread like ripples in water. Workers exchanged wide-eyed looks, whispering to one another. "Did you see the lights?" one said. "The station moved with her voice," another replied. "She silenced him," someone breathed, almost in disbelief. Ronan's eyes darted across the hall, anger flashing in his expression, but his voice remained trapped in his throat. He stepped forward as if to regain control, but the moment had already slipped away. The workers were no longer looking at him. They were looking at Myra. For the first time in years, their attention belonged to someone else. Myra did not try to hold their gaze. She bowed slightly and stepped back from the center of the stage, her gray uniform plain among the glowing banners and shining walls. Yet even in her simplicity, she appeared stronger than the man who stood beside her. At last, Ronan forced his voice out. "It was a trick," he said sharply, his tone unsteady. "Nothing more than chance. Machines respond to signals, not songs. Do not be fooled." But his words no longer carried the same weight. Workers did not lower their heads as they once did. Instead, they stood straighter, their eyes lingering on Myra as if silently questioning everything they had believed before. One worker near the front took a bold step forward. His voice trembled, but he spoke clearly enough to be heard. "No machine has ever answered us like that. It was not chance." Gasps echoed through the hall. A worker had spoken aloud, in front of Ronan himself. Such a thing had not happened in years. Guards shifted uneasily, their hands tightening on their weapons, but no order came. Ronan was too stunned to command them. Another worker spoke, then another. Their words were not shouts, only soft statements, but together, they grew stronger. "She made the station sing. She is one of us, yet greater than him. She showed us what he cannot." The whispers swelled into a low chorus, not loud enough to be rebellion, but too strong to be silence. For the first time, the great hall echoed not with Ronan's voice, but with the voices of the people. Myra looked at them quietly. She did not raise her hand, she did not speak, but her presence seemed to give them courage. She had not planned this moment, yet here it was born not from power, but from a simple song. Ronan's face darkened. "Enough," he snapped. His voice rose, but it trembled slightly at the edges. "Return to your stations. Now." Some workers hesitated. A few even looked as though they might resist. But Myra stepped forward once more. Her calm voice cut through the tension. "Go back to your duties," she said softly. "Do not bring harm upon yourselves." Her words surprised them. They expected her to challenge him, to seize the moment. Instead, she told them to stay safe. She did not want power, and that truth only made her stronger in their eyes. The workers dispersed slowly, but their steps were lighter than before. Their eyes no longer looked down at the floor. They carried whispers with them, whispers that Ronan could not silence. When the hall was nearly empty, Ronan turned to Myra, his jaw tight. "You think this makes you powerful? You are nothing but a worker. Do not believe this changes anything." Myra met his gaze calmly. Her brown eyes held no fear. "I do not seek power," she said simply. "I only sang." Her words struck him harder than defiance. Power had always been his language, yet she spoke of none. That night, across the station, the story spread like starlight. In the sleeping quarters, workers repeated what they had seen. In the docking bays, pilots told the tale to new arrivals. In the maintenance halls, whispers turned into quiet hope. She silenced him with nothing but a song. Some smiled for the first time in months. Others lifted their heads as they walked, no longer crushed by fear. Even those who doubted could not ignore the truth. The station itself had answered her voice. Far above, in his office of glass, Ronan paced back and forth. His empire was still his, but a crack had appeared. One song, one woman, had shaken the silence that held his rule together. He clenched his fists, determined to crush it. Yet deep in his mind, a question gnawed at him. Why did the station answer her, and not me? Myra, in her small quarters on level 14, sat quietly on her bunk. She held no dreams of leadership, no plans for rebellion. But as she closed her eyes, she felt the hum of the station, steady and alive, as if listening still. The silence of Helios Prime had been broken. And once broken, silence could never fully return. Days passed after Myra's song, but the memory of it did not fade. It lived in the minds of the workers, carried through whispers in corridors and quiet talks in cafeterias. On Helios Prime, silence had once been a shield, but now silence felt different, less heavy, less final. Workers began to walk with straighter backs. They still feared the guards, but their fear was no longer absolute. Every man and woman on the station had seen the same moment, the untouchable CEO silenced by a simple song. That image could not be erased. Myra, however, continued her duties as before. She swept the corridors, polished the panels, and kept her eyes low. She did not seek attention. If workers spoke to her, she only offered a small smile or a quiet word. Yet even in her silence, she became a symbol. "She is just like us," one worker said while carrying a crate. And yet she stood before him. "If she can, maybe we can too," another replied. These words spread slowly, like sparks drifting through the air, waiting to catch. Far above, in his tall office of glass, Ronan Vale grew restless. He read reports of production still running smoothly, profits still flowing, ships still arriving. Yet none of it satisfied him. Numbers on a screen could not hide the truth he had seen in the Great Hall. The people were no longer looking at him with the same fear. He slammed his hand on the desk. "She is nothing," he shouted at his assistant. "A cleaner with a song. And yet they look at her as if she holds the stars in her hands." His assistant kept silent, as most did in his presence. Ronan's anger filled the room, but underneath it was something he would not admit: doubt. That evening, Ronan ordered a meeting with his closest advisors. They gathered in a round chamber high above the station, the stars stretching endlessly outside the glass walls. Ronan paced before them, his dark suit sharp against the light. "The workers grow bold," he said, his voice heavy. "They whisper. They question. This cannot be allowed. Order must be restored." One advisor, an older man with gray hair, shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, with respect, they whisper because of what they saw." The station itself seemed to answer her voice. Ronan glared at him. "Machines do not answer voices. It was a trick. And even if it were true, it changes nothing. This station runs because of me. It will always run because of me." The advisors nodded quickly, though some eyes showed doubt. Ronan did not notice, or perhaps he refused to. Meanwhile, Myra continued to discover more about her gift. Late at night, when she worked alone in quiet corridors, she sang softly. The station responded each time, lights glowing in rhythm, engines humming in harmony, even air systems shifting with her tone. It was not control she felt, but connection, as if the vast station recognized her song as something familiar. One night, a group of workers passing by stopped to watch her. She tried to fall silent, but one of them whispered, "Please, keep singing." Myra hesitated, then continued gently. The workers stood still, their tired faces softening. For the first time in years, hope touched their eyes. "You give us courage," one told her. Her chest tightened at the words. She had never wanted to lead anyone, never wanted to stand in front of crowds. Yet she could not deny the truth: her song was giving people something Ronan never had: comfort. Soon, even the visiting aliens began to notice. Merchants from other worlds who docked at Helios Prime heard the rumors and grew curious. Some asked questions. Others whispered of ancient traditions, old tales of voices that could resonate with the universe itself. One alien, tall and slender with silver skin, spoke softly to a group of workers, "Your cleaning lady carries an echo of something forgotten. Among our people, it was once called the harmony of stars. We believed it lost long ago. But perhaps humanity holds it still." These words spread even faster than before. Humans had always been underestimated by stronger, older species. But now, for the first time, aliens looked at them with wonder instead of doubt. The shift was clear. Workers walked taller. Guards noticed, uneasy but uncertain. Managers whispered behind closed doors, afraid that their authority was thinning. And Ronan, in his high chamber, felt the weight pressing against him. One night, as he stared out the window at the endless stars, his reflection in the glass looked smaller than ever before. The silence that once surrounded him now felt fragile, like glass ready to shatter. The next morning, he appeared in the great hall once again. He stood before the workers, his voice steady but strained. "You may believe in songs," he said coldly. "You may believe in whispers. But never forget the station runs because of me. Without me, you are nothing." But as his words echoed, something was different. Workers did not lower their eyes as they once did. Some looked at him directly. Others exchanged glances, silent but strong. They no longer seemed crushed. At the back of the hall, Myra stood quietly among them. She did not speak, she did not sing, but her presence alone was enough. The workers' courage did not come from Ronan anymore. It came from the memory of her song. And Ronan knew it. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched, but his power was slipping like sand through his fingers. The silence of fear was breaking, replaced by something stronger: hope. The first light of the station's artificial morning spilled across Helios Prime. The corridors, once echoing only with footsteps of workers hurried in fear, now carried whispers of change. Myra moved quietly among them, carrying her cleaning tools as usual. Her gray uniform was plain, but her presence no longer went unnoticed. Wherever she passed, workers lifted their heads, smiling softly, emboldened by her courage and the memory of her song. Ronan Vale watched from his high office, the endless stars stretching beyond the glass walls. His empire still functioned, yet it felt smaller than before. Numbers and credits could not measure the weight he had lost. For the first time, he saw the station not as his domain, but as a living place, filled with people who could think, feel, and if inspired act. He had tried to silence the whispers. He had tried to command obedience. But hope, once sparked, could not be crushed. And it was hope, not fear, that now guided the workers of Helios Prime. Myra's song had become more than a melody, it was a symbol. It reminded people that strength did not come from wealth or status, but from courage, unity, and truth. That morning, a gathering was called in the Great Hall. Workers filed in quietly, but this time there was no fear in their steps. Ronan stood at the center, his arms crossed, trying to look in control. Myra stepped forward slowly, her calm brown eyes meeting those of every person in the hall. "You are all capable of more than fear," she said softly, her voice carrying across the chamber. "You are strong, even if you have been told otherwise. Do not let silence or power make you forget that." The workers listened in awe. Some nodded. Some whispered their agreement to each other. Even the guards straightened, not in fear, but in quiet respect. Ronan's lips pressed into a thin line. He opened his mouth to speak, but for once, no words came. Myra's calm certainty filled the room in a way that his orders never could. He realized that no command, no decree, could restore the silence that had once ruled the station. One by one, workers began to speak. They suggested improvements, shared ideas, and even proposed changes to the way the station operated. For years, fear had kept them silent, but now the sound of courage grew stronger than the sound of orders. Ronan felt the weight of his empire shift beneath him. He had ruled with absolute control, yet the people he had tried to dominate were now moving forward without needing him. His pride wrestled with the truth he could not ignore: he was no longer the sole center of power on Helios Prime. Myra stepped to the side, letting the voices rise. She did not speak for them, she only reminded them of their own strength. In the quiet, shining corners of the hall, she hummed softly, not to command, but to comfort. The station seemed to respond again, the panels pulsing lightly, the engines harmonizing as if in approval. A group of young technicians approached her. "Thank you," one said simply. "You reminded us that we matter." Myra smiled. "You always mattered," she replied. "You just forgot." Outside, docking ships came and went as usual. The merchants and travelers who had long seen humans as ordinary now paused to watch. Some whispered of the cleaning lady whose song had changed a station, who had reminded an empire that courage could not be bought. The reputation of humanity grew quietly, a subtle pride spreading across the galaxy. Back in his office, Ronan finally lowered his arms. He could no longer command fear, and he realized that trying to fight this new dawn would only break his station from within. He stepped back from the glass, letting the workers' voices fill the great hall. For the first time, he understood that true leadership did not come from domination, it came from trust, from guidance, and from listening. The days that followed were filled with small, steady changes. Workers took initiative. Guards respected their fellow humans as equals, not only as subordinates. Managers collaborated instead of issuing orders. And Myra? She continued her work quietly, sweeping the halls, polishing the panels, and humming softly in moments of calm. Yet everyone knew she was more than a cleaning lady. She was a symbol of hope, courage, and the quiet power of humanity. At night, she often stood by the wide windows, watching the stars. She did not seek fame or recognition, but she understood her role had changed something fundamental. Helios Prime was no longer a station ruled by fear. It was a station alive with human courage, with workers who had found their voices. And somewhere deep inside, Ronan Vale realized that he had learned a lesson he could never have imagined. Leadership was not about silence. It was about inspiring people to rise beyond their fears. And in doing so, humanity had once again shown why it could never be underestimated in the vast galaxy. The station hummed softly, responding to the quiet courage of one small woman and the awakened strength of thousands. Helios Prime was no longer just a symbol of power, it was a testament to hope. Myra closed her eyes and listened to the gentle hum. A new dawn had arrived.